He used to beg for my cooking. Now he won't even look at me. Every bite I made with love, she turned into poison with her words. Life for it doesn't see you the same way anymore. It's like looking at a stranger who still has your child's eyes, but not his soul. I still remember the first time she came into our house. Her name was Lydia. Soft voice, polite smile, expensive perfume that didn't match our kitchen table. My son, Marcus, was glowing beside her, holding her hand like he'd caught the moon itself. And me? I smiled too, but something inside me went cold. Maybe mothers just know. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was happy, that's all that mattered. Lydia was charming enough, asking about my recipes, offering to help set the table, complimenting the curtains. But every time she spoke, it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced her lines before walking through my door. I pushed that thought away because Marcus deserved to love whoever he wanted. He'd worked so hard, college, job, his own apartment. I'd raised him mostly on my own after his father left, and I thought maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally giving him peace. But peace doesn't come dressed in black silk and sugar-coated smiles. At first, the changes were small. He stopped dropping by unannounced. Then, our weekly Sunday dinners turned into once-a-month lunches. Lydia always had an excuse. Work, errands, her mother's health. I tried to understand. Relationships are busy, right? People build their own lives. Still, it hurt when my son started texting instead of calling. And when he did call, his voice felt different. Shorter sentences, fewer laughs. He used to tell me about everything, what he cooked, how his boss annoyed him, how Lydia made him feel alive. Then suddenly, he stopped sharing altogether. I kept cooking for two anyway. Habit, I guess. There's comfort in chopping onions, stirring soup, pretending the house isn't too quiet. Sometimes I'd pack up leftovers and drive over to his place, just to see him. He'd answer the door with that tired smile, the kind people wear when they're being polite, not happy. And Lydia would appear behind him, hand on his shoulder, reminding him that they already ate. I could tell she didn't want me there. Maybe she saw me as a threat, the mother who knew him better than she ever could. But I tried. Lord knows I tried to be kind. I told her I liked her dress. I brought flowers when she got promoted. I bit my tongue when she corrected me in front of Marcus. The first time I realized something was truly wrong was last Thanksgiving. It used to be our favorite day. Cooking together from dawn till dinner, music playing, the smell of cinnamon and turkey filling the whole house. This time, Lydia insisted on hosting, said it would be less stress for me. I thought it was sweet at first, until I walked into their apartment. The table was perfect, magazine perfect, but there wasn't a single thing I recognized. Store-bought pies, instant gravy, some kind of trendy roasted kale dish that smelled like burnt oil. I tried to smile, but it felt like biting down on glass. Marcus hugged me quick and said, "Mom, isn't this great? Lydia's been planning this for weeks." He looked proud of her, proud like he used to be of me, and that broke something small inside. I offered to help in the kitchen, but Lydia waved me off. "You can just relax, Mrs. Harris," she said, smiling that sharp little smile. "You've done enough for him. Let me take care of him now." Done enough for him? Those words hung in the air like smoke. Dinner was awkward. Every time I tried to talk to Marcus about something, his job, his health, Lydia would interrupt with a story, a joke, or a gentle touch on his hand. It wasn't obvious, but it was constant, like a quiet battle for control. When dessert came, she handed out plates before I could even stand. And that's when I noticed Marcus didn't touch the pie I'd brought. Apple, his favorite since he was 5. He just smiled apologetically and said, "I'm full, Mom, maybe later." Later never came. After that night, he started drifting faster. My texts went unanswered for days. Calls went to voicemail. And when he finally visited a month later, he barely touched the casserole I made. He said Lydia was trying to eat healthier. I told him I could cook healthy too, but he just smiled that empty smile again. I didn't know it then, but she was already feeding him something else. Not food, but words, slow and poisonous. She started planting stories, little lies dressed as concern. She told him I was manipulative, that I didn't respect boundaries, that I wanted to control him. It was like she was rewriting our whole history, turning love into weaponry. If I called too often, I was clingy. If I gave him advice, I was undermining his independence. If I brought food, I was trying to make him feel guilty. It was like she was rewriting our whole history, turning love into weaponry. One day, I asked Marcus if he was okay. He sighed and said, "Mom, Lydia feels like you don't like her." I told him that wasn't true, that I was just adjusting, but he shook his head. "You make her uncomfortable," he said. That stung. Uncomfortable? How? He hesitated. "You look at her like you don't trust her." He wasn't wrong. I didn't. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing him defend her like that, it felt like someone scraping glass across my heart. After he left, I cried for hours, the kind of crying that leaves your chest sore and your throat dry. I started questioning myself. Was I really that overbearing? Had I been too protective all these years? Maybe I'd made him feel smothered. Maybe I was the problem. But deep down, there was another voice, smaller but sharper, whispering that this wasn't just natural distance. This was calculated. Lydia wanted me gone. The next few months were quiet. Too quiet. He didn't come for Christmas. He said they were going on a couples retreat. He didn't even call on my birthday. When I finally saw him again, it was by accident. I was grocery shopping when I spotted them across the aisle. He looked tired, paler, and there was something in his eyes, like he was walking through fog. I waved. He hesitated before waving back. Lydia smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. She leaned close to him, whispered something, and they turned away, just like that. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the cold stew I'd made, untouched. My house felt too big, too quiet. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I thought about every meal we'd shared, every birthday cake I'd baked, every time I stayed up late waiting for him to come home. And now he wouldn't even eat my food. That's when I realized it wasn't about the meals. It was about erasing me. You know that saying, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach? Well, she figured out the same path could lead out. All she had to do was make him believe I was the poison. And she did it. So slowly, so cleverly, that by the time I saw it, it was already done. One evening, after weeks of silence, Marcus called. His voice was cold, formal. "Mon, can we talk?" My heart leapt. "Of course, honey. Come by any time." He paused. "I think it's better if we meet somewhere neutral." Neutral. That word hit like a slap, like I was some kind of enemy. We met at a coffee shop near his work. He looked tired, older somehow. I wanted to reach out, fix his collar like I used to, but he leaned back. "Lydia thinks we should set some boundaries. You've been too involved. It's affecting our marriage." I stared at him. "Too involved? Marcus, I barely see you anymore." He sighed. "Exactly. When we do talk, it's always emotional. Lydia says you guilt-trip me." I could feel my pulse pounding. "So now I can't even care about you without it being manipulation?" He looked away. "I just need space, Mom. Please respect that." That word, respect? As if I disrespected him by loving him? When he left, I sat there long after my coffee went cold. Watching him walk out that door
felt like watching my whole world shrink to nothing. But even then, even in that heartbreak, something inside me hardened. Because if she could turn him against me, I could find a way to turn the truth back on her. Not through shouting or begging, through patience, through proof. I started noticing small things when he posted photos online. He looked tired, distant. Lydia's captions always hinted at perfection, like our best life, love and growth. But his eyes told another story. I started saving everything. Screenshots, comments, dates, quietly building a timeline of how she had isolated him. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but
Then, one night, I got a call. Not from Marcus, but from Lydia's cousin, whom I barely knew. She said she thought I should know something. Lydia wasn't who she pretended to be. There were other families, other relationships, always the same pattern. Charm the man, alienate his family, drain his savings, move on. It sounded insane, but something about the way she said it, tired, defeated, made me believe her. I didn't tell Marcus right away. He wouldn't have believed me, not yet. But I started preparing, quietly, observing, learning. I realized if I wanted to reach him again, I couldn't just confront her. I had to let the mask fall off on its own. And that's where it began, the slow, careful plan to show him what she really was. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I waited. I let time do the talking. And when the cracks finally started to show, I made sure he saw every single one. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire, it's frost. Slow, creeping, patient. It doesn't explode. It freezes the lie until it shatters on its own. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed quiet and prayed he'd come back? Or would you have started planning the moment you realized love had turned into poison? You know how silence can start to sound alive when you've lived with it too long? It creaks, it sighs, it whispers things you don't want to hear. That was my house after Marcus drifted away. I'd sit at the table every evening, pretending to read, but mostly I listened to the refrigerator hum, to the clock counting seconds I'd never get back. Each sound reminded me I was losing him 1 minute at a time. Still, I waited. I knew people like Lydia can't keep their masks on forever. They get sloppy when they think they've won. It started small. A missed birthday post on her social media, a friend comment she deleted too quickly. Then one afternoon, I got a message from her cousin again. Quiet voice, nervous. She said Lydia was asking questions about Marcus's life insurance. I told her to save the messages, every word. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew this was how women like Lydia operated. Charm first, control next, profit last. I needed proof Marcus couldn't ignore, something she couldn't twist, so I began collecting the invisible things. The tone she used when she spoke to me, the way Marcus repeated her phrases word for word. She'd say, "We just need healthy boundaries," and suddenly he'd use the exact same sentence days later. It was like she'd installed herself inside his head. That's when I decided to get creative. I started a small blog, nothing fancy, anonymous, no names, just stories from a mother's kitchen. Each post was a short reflection about letting go, about manipulation, about how love can be used as currency. It wasn't meant for the world. It was bait for one person. Marcus read everything online. I knew eventually he'd stumble onto it. I poured my heart into those words. My regrets, my confusion, my hope. Within weeks, the posts started getting shared around small relationship forums. I watched the numbers climb quietly, never commenting, never revealing myself. Then one day, Marcus texted me out of nowhere. "Mom, did you write that story about the poisoned dinner?" My hands shook.
I wanted to lie, but decided to keep it simple. Why do you ask? He didn't reply right away. Hours passed. Finally, he wrote, "It felt familiar." That was all. But it was something, a tiny thread between us again. Meanwhile, Lydia was unraveling. You could see it in her photos, her smile too tight, captions turning defensive, real relationships take work, ignore the haters. She'd built her image on perfection, and now cracks were showing. A mutual friend mentioned she'd been arguing with Marcus in public, something about money missing from their joint account. I stayed quiet, pretending ignorance, but inside, I was watching every move. When Marcus finally called again, his voice had softened. "Mom, I think we need to talk." "Of course, sweetheart. Come over any time." He hesitated. "Lydia doesn't want me to." That sentence told me everything. He wanted to come, but she was still pulling strings. "Then maybe meet me at the diner," I suggested. "The one with the lemon pie you love." A pause, then a sigh. "All right, tomorrow." I barely slept that night. I cleaned the house, even though we weren't meeting here, cooked enough food for 3 people out of habit, and sat by the window until dawn. At the diner the next day, he looked worn out. Not just tired, drained. I could see the boy he used to be hiding behind those dark circles. We talked about safe topics first: work, weather, traffic. Then I said quietly, "Marcus, are you happy?" He stared at his coffee. "It's complicated." "Does she make you feel safe?" He didn't answer right away. "She makes me feel obligated." That word hung there between us like a secret confession. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, "Sometimes I think I can't breathe around her, Mom. But I don't want to prove her right. She says I think she's bad for me." I leaned forward. "I don't need to prove her wrong. I just need you to see for yourself." He nodded slowly, almost relieved. "I just don't know what's real anymore." That's when I realized he wasn't lost, just trapped inside her story. I didn't need to fight her directly. I just had to help him remember his own voice. So I started reminding him of small things: the smell of my cornbread, the song we used to hum while cleaning, the day he cried over a lost puppy and swore he'd never let anyone suffer alone. Each memory was a breadcrumb leading him back home. For a while, it worked. He started visiting again, cautiously, usually when Lydia claimed to be busy. He'd sit at the kitchen table, eat quietly, sometimes smile, but guilt always followed him out the door. Once he whispered, "She'll be angry I'm here." I wanted to grab him and say, "If she controls who you see, she doesn't love you." But instead, I just said, "Tell her you're helping your mother fix a leak. It won't be a lie. I do have a broken heart." He laughed a little then, the first real laugh in months. Still, I knew Lydia wouldn't let him go easily. Manipulators rarely do. She started texting me directly, polite threats disguised as civility. "Marcus mentioned you're struggling emotionally. Maybe give him some space." Another one, "It's hard for him when you guilt him with home-cooked meals." I saved every message. Proof of her tone, her subtle cruelty. The next step wasn't confrontation, it was exposure. I contacted the cousin again, the one who'd warned me. Together, we pieced together old messages,
Screenshots, dates. Turns out, Lydia had done the same routine with a man named Eric 2 years before Marcus. The pattern was identical: fast romance, isolation, financial drain, sudden exit. Eric's sister even reached out to me after the cousin connected us. She said, "You're not crazy. Lydia nearly destroyed my brother's life." That sentence was the validation I'd been starving for. I could have taken all that straight to Marcus, dumped the proof on his lap. But timing mattered. If I pushed too soon, Lydia would twist it again, make me the villain. I needed him to be ready to see her without my words guiding him. So I waited for an opening. It came faster than I expected.
Marcus called one evening, voice trembling. "Mom, can I stay at your place tonight?" My heart dropped. "Of course, baby. What happened?" "Just an argument." She said some things. When he arrived, his eyes were red. He didn't talk much, just sat on the couch, staring at nothing. After a while, he whispered, "She said you want to ruin us, that you're jealous." I asked him gently, "And do you believe that?" He shook his head. "I don't know what to believe anymore." So I handed him my phone. "Then read." He scrolled through the screenshots, the old messages from her cousin, the testimony from Eric's sister. His hands started to shake. "Where did you get these?" "From people she hurt before you." He sat in silence for a long time. Then he whispered, "She told me her ex was abusive." I nodded slowly. Maybe he was, but maybe that's what she tells every man who starts to see through her. Tears welled in his eyes. I thought she loved me. She loves control, and when control slips, she'll blame whoever's closest. He stayed the night. The next morning, he left early, saying he needed to think. I let him go, not pressing for details. The day dragged by, heavy with dread. Part of me worried he'd run straight back to her, let her spin a new story. Part of me hoped he'd finally see the truth. Around dusk, I heard tires in the driveway. Marcus came in looking pale but determined. He said, "You were right." She admitted she checked my emails, my phone logs, said it was for my own good. "What did you say?"
I told her I was done. I exhaled slowly, relief flooding through me, but it didn't last. He continued, "She didn't take it well. She said if I leave, she'll make sure everyone thinks you turned me against her. She said people believed the loudest voice. That was Lydia's final defense. Smear me before I could speak." I looked him in the eyes. "Then we'll let her talk, but we'll make sure the truth has an audience too." Over the next week, things escalated. She posted vague things online, quotes about betrayal, captions about toxic parents. Friends started messaging me confused. I stayed silent publicly, letting her weave her web. Meanwhile, Marcus quietly moved his things out of their apartment. He told me she'd started showing up at his job, crying, shouting. That's when I realized she wasn't just manipulative, she was unraveling, and people were starting to notice. One night he called late. "Mom, she's here," he whispered, "outside my place. Do you want me to come?" "No, I just needed to hear your voice." I listened to the tremble in his breath, the footsteps outside. He said, "She's knocking." Then silence. Minutes stretched. Finally, he said, "She's gone. For now." After that, we decided it was time for full daylight. Marcus scheduled a meeting with a lawyer, explained the emotional abuse, the monitoring, the manipulation. He didn't mention me at all. It was his story now, his voice. Watching him reclaim it felt like watching the sun come through after a long storm. But storms don't vanish, they leave puddles, reflections, warnings. A few days later, Lydia posted something cryptic, a photo of Marcus's old mug, captioned, "You can't steal what was never yours." The comments exploded, people speculating, choosing sides, and that's when my blog suddenly went viral again. Someone connected the dots, realizing the poisoned dinner story matched Lydia's public meltdown. I never confirmed it, but the timing spoke for itself. Marcus called that night, half amused, half shaken. "Mom, I think your story's trending." I laughed softly. "Guess people love a good mystery." He said, "They're guessing it's about us." I said, "Let them guess. Truth finds its own way." For the first time in a long time, he sounded lighter. But as we talked, I heard something in the background, a faint knock on his door, muffled voices, then silence again. "Marcus?" I asked. "Are you alone?" He hesitated. "Yeah, I think so." The pause that followed wasn't reassuring.
"Lock the door, sweetheart," I said quietly. He didn't answer right away, then barely above a whisper, "Mom, I think she still has a key." And that's where I'll stop. For now. Because sometimes the scariest moment isn't when the truth comes out. It's the second after, when the person who's been living behind a mask realizes it's gone, and you don't know what they'll do next. When Marcus whispered that she still had a key, every nerve in my body went cold. I told him to keep me on the phone, to stay where he was, to breathe. I could hear him moving quietly across the apartment, the faint rattle of a lock, the low creak of the floorboards. Then, nothing. For a few long seconds, all I could hear was static and my own heartbeat. Finally, his voice came back, soft but steady. "I locked the deadbolt. Lights are off. She won't think I'm here." I wanted to drive over that instant, but I knew showing up might only feed the chaos. Instead, I said, "Listen to me, Marcus. Tomorrow morning, go straight to the building manager. Change the locks, file the report. You're not doing this alone." He promised he would, and somehow we both managed to sleep, barely. The next morning he came by, eyes red but clear. He'd already changed the locks, already spoken with the manager. She texted me all night, half of them apologies, half of them threats. He handed me his phone. I read through the messages. They were classic control disguised as heartbreak. "You'll regret this. I'm the only one who really knows you. Your mother turned you into a someone cold." Each line was a knot in a rope she was still trying to pull. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Marcus said quietly, "I think I need to tell people what she did. Not for revenge, just so she can't do it again." That's when the plan became something larger than us. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was reclaiming his story. We started simple. Marcus gathered his own proof, screenshots, bank records, messages. We met with a counselor who helped him put the emotional abuse into words that people could understand. And then, with the lawyer's help, he drafted a statement. Not a rant, not an accusation, just the truth. When he finally posted it online, it was like lighting a match in a dark room. Friends who distanced themselves reached out again, shocked by what they read. A few even admitted they'd seen hints of Lydia's behavior, but hadn't known how to name it. And Lydia? She tried to fight back, of course. Her first response was a long post calling him ungrateful, painting herself as the victim of a controlling family. But this time, her charm didn't work. People remembered the inconsistencies, the stories that never quite added up. Within days, her version fell apart under the weight of her own contradictions. Even one of her old employers stepped forward, an HR manager who'd had to let her go for manipulating coworkers and falsifying expenses. Suddenly, all those polished photos and perfect captions online looked hollow. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Truth has its own gravity. Once it's out there, it pulls everything else into place. A week later, he came to my house again. We cooked together, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but it felt like reclaiming a ritual. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and said, "You know, I almost believed her when she said you were trying to control me." I smiled softly. "And now?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Now I know love doesn't need control. It just waits." We didn't need to say more. Some wounds don't close with apologies. They close with understanding. A few months passed. Marcus found a new apartment across town, closer to his job. Lydia had moved away, last we heard. No forwarding address, no goodbye. I'd like to think she went somewhere quiet. Somewhere she might finally look in a mirror without seeing an enemy. One evening, while cleaning out old boxes, I found a photo of Marcus as a little boy, covered in flour, grinning at the camera with a cookie tray in his hands. I set it on the counter, smiling to myself. The kitchen smelled like cornbread again. Later that night, Marcus stopped by unexpectedly. "Thought I'd bring dessert," he said, holding up a bag from that same diner. We sat together, comfortable silence between us. After a while, he said, "You ever think people can change?" I thought about Lydia, about how easily lies can grow in the dark and how hard truth fights its way into the light. I said, "People can choose. Change only happens when the choosing hurts less than the pretending." He nodded, thoughtful. "I think I'm ready to stop pretending." As he left, I watched from the doorway, feeling that familiar ache of love and distance. He turned once more before getting into his car. "Mom, thanks for not giving up on me." I smiled. "You're my son, Marcus. I couldn't if I tried." When his taillights disappeared down the street, I went back inside, switched off the lights, and let the quiet fill the house again. But this time, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like peace. And yet, a few days later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Marcus and me at that diner, taken from outside through the window. On the back, in small handwriting, were 3 words: "Some stories never end." I stared at it for a long time, the air around me suddenly still. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone had found the picture online. Or maybe Lydia wasn't as far away as we hoped. I slipped the photo back in the envelope and tucked it inside a drawer. Some truths don't need chasing. They reveal themselves when the time is right. Until then, I'll keep cooking, keep waiting, keep listening to the quiet. Because peace isn't the absence of ghosts. It's learning how to live with them.